Here is another edition of Black to School. So last week we heard from Tamia Morgan, who was last year's Teacher of the Year from Central High School in Kansas City Public Schools. And just to continue on with this series, having a chance to sit down and talk with my mother, who was my first educator and has been in the field of education for over 3 decades. And so we'll be talking to her about how teachers can be better prepared to support Black students. And so when I think about the considerable amount of experience that she has, I thought that she would be a great person to feature. So welcome, Miss Nance.
Hello,
How are you doing?
I'm wonderful.
Awesome. Well, we will dive right in. So I'll share some questions with you. And so, yes, that first question is just about your experience in education. I mean, feel free to go back to why you even wanted to work in the field, but just as much as you want to share about your life for the past 35, 36 years.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, I started off wanting to be I knew I've always wanted to work with children. And I started off thinking that I wanted to be a pediatrician, but it didn't work out. So I decided that another avenue that should explore is teaching. And so I, got my degree in elementary and special education. And for the first, I would say probably 15 years of my time, I was an elementary classroom teacher. I've taught grades one, first grade, third grade, and fifth grade at the elementary level. And then after that experience, I became a middle school literacy coach, and I supported literacy instruction at the middle school level. And I also did some actual teaching in summer school in the middle school grades. And then after a couple of 2, 3 years of that, I then became the curriculum coordinator for what used to be called in the state of Missouri communication arts. And I did that role for approximately 8 years and worked with uh, K-12. So my responsibilities were to ensure that the curriculum for literacy instruction was being implemented in K through 12 classrooms. And I also supported the work of instructional coaches in the buildings all across the district. Then I went to Kansas City, Kansas public schools and did 7 years over there. And I was once again a district level instructional coach supporting instructional coaches in the elementary schools. And now I am finally an instructional coach uh, in one elementary school. I currently work at Hogan uh, Academy or Hogan Preparatory Academy Charter School, and we have children in grades kindergarten to fifth grade. And my primary responsibility is to support teachers in grades 3, 4, and 5 with instruction. So
That's
that's
intense. And you left out that you taught at college level courses. So Professor
oh yes,
Nance.
yes, I have taught. I did forget that.
I
Uh,
know, with just so many years of experience, it all just kind of rolls
for
together.
several years, I taught at Webster University here in Kansas City, Missouri, and I worked with students that were working to achieve their master's degree, and uh, that was a great experience. Mostly, I taught multicultural education, which explored the which explored different aspects of education as it related to um, just a wide spectrum of, when you think about educating students of color and all those different issues. Was primarily I had teachers that were working in suburban districts, but had no experience in working in urban education. And so this was a class that um, I had gotten the opportunity to choose to teach, and it was a really good experience. So
Well, that was actually a perfect segue into the next question of what has been something that you've noticed about the ways that teachers are prepared for working in the classroom. I mean, you just talked specifically about, suburban teachers or teachers that work in suburban school districts, coming, teaching or taking a part of this class. So, a little bit more about that. And then just kind of in general, when you think about teacher preparation programs, whether it be students graduating with their bachelor's degrees in education, or when you think of like the Teach for America programs, but just in general, what do you notice about those programs?
well, to begin with, I think uh, young people that go the traditional route of choosing education and going to a 4 year university tend to be a little bit more, shall I say, prepared for working in the classroom. Now, because the majority of my career has been spent in urban districts, um, there are some things that I feel that they're not so prepared for. But on the surface, in terms of understanding how to write lesson plans and understanding some of the basic tenets of literacy instruction and math instruction and all of those good things, I think they're pretty well prepared. Having worked pretty significantly with young people who are taking an alternative route to teaching, such as the Teach for America program, I find that they are the most ill prepared. And I say that because number one, they haven't, of course, had any education classes. There are some that may have had one or two in their undergrad program, depending on what their original degree was in,
Mm-hmm.
or depending on what they had chosen to major in and then switched over to education. But the vast majority of them
Mm-hmm.
lack a lot. They lack the content knowledge, and they also lack what it means to teach in an urban setting. And the truth of the matter is, Teach for America is a program that primarily sends their people to urban areas.
Right.
So, and they're on the fast track when they begin their time in the school that they've been hired to work in. They're going for their master's degree in education, but they skipped the bachelor's degree, although they do have a bachelor's degree
Yeah.
in their chosen field. So, and I don't want to give the
Yeah.
impression that none of them are prepared, but I just would say the vast majority of them are not as prepared. So, as an instructional coach,
Mm-hmm.
I find that there's a lot of things that we must do to help them even just start the year, because they're so used to seeing websites like Teacher Pay Teacher and all of these other websites where teachers can go and get resources
Mm-hmm.
to help them to teach, and those are activities, but
Mm-hmm.
they lack instructional strategies, and instructional strategies is what they need, and they need to understand that.
So even so, as you say, instructional strategies being a very key component. So when you think about these preparation programs, and then specifically when I guess the term I'm thinking of is cultural competency. So I don't know if you had the chance to take anything related to that back at Drake in the early '80s, or if that's something that you notice now. But what can be said about how teachers are prepared for that cultural competency piece so that they are able to not only teach students the material, but when you think about kind of the relatability and understanding, well, this student might have this experience because of their race, and those kind of things.
Well, I'm just gonna be honest with you. I don't
It doesn't
necessarily.
exist.
I don't really think that. I'll be very honest with you. I don't think my 4 years at Drake necessarily prepared me for teaching in an urban setting,
Mhm.
period. What saved me was the fact that I looked like the majority of the children that I was teaching. And then also, we had a strong professional development program in the districts that I've been,
Mhm.
blessed to work in. And so most of that cultural competency that I received was through professional development within the school district.
Mhm.
Particularly my tenure of 25 years in the Kansas City, Missouri school district, I think I got the most training in cultural competency because the district was very multicultural, and we had a high number of English as a second language students.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so I worked in the years that I was in the classroom in Kansas City, Missouri School District. I worked at a school that had a very high ESL population. And
Yeah.
so we did a lot of professional development on cultural competency.
Yes, I feel like I kind of remember many of the students that you talked about, or even still kind of have some interactions and engagement with today, and thinking about just like the variety of cultures that they represented. And it's like, again, not only are you trying to teach them these instructional lessons, it's like some of them are literally coming to Kansas City, to the United States, and not even knowing English. So it's like, well, how do I let them know about maybe some simple things that we take for granted, like hygiene, that's different in another culture, and being able to, kind of have that relatability in addition to teaching them math and science, and those kind of things. So, kind of touched on this in a little bit, but in an ideal world, if you think of pre and post COVID, since that's kind of where we are now, how would you design a teacher preparation program? What would maybe be like the top three things that you would say if you are wanting to be a teacher? These are the things that you need. If it's less or more, that's fine too.
Okay, well, the first one would definitely be classroom management.
Hmm.
I think that's one of the areas that teacher prep programs don't do a very good job of,
Hmm.
and particularly classroom management, uh, not just on the, let's praise them all day, but also on the idea of setting clear expectations for students and the following through, because I think that's one of the biggest challenges that our teachers face is they may start off strong with, setting those expectations, but there's no follow through. And the minute that uh you know don't follow through, that's when things start to fall apart. And I will also say that working with children in the urban core, you really have to be very steadfast and you have to be very strong with your classroom management. And sometimes, I tell teachers, I said, you almost have to be a very mean person in the beginning. But like I tell them, how you start out the year is how you will end the year. If you start off the year crappy, you're going to end the year crappy. But if you
Yeah.
start off strong and let them know that you are the authoritarian in the class, but that this is a community and we work together and we resolve our issues together, and that if you feel unsafe in this classroom, sorry about that, that we can resolve that. So classroom management would be
Hmm.
the first one. The second one would definitely be cultural competency,
Hmm.
and I think I've kind of covered that. But just making sure that young people that are coming into the field understand you know, white privilege, and they understand what it means to be Black in America. And also the whole concept of working with students who are second language learners, because because many of our ESL students were born in the
Mhm.
United States, but then we also have children that are in the United States that are refugees,
Mhm.
and working and teaching children who are refugees sometimes has its own challenges, but you need to the teachers need to understand from whence they came. And one, it's not about feeling sorry for them, but
Mhm.
it's about understanding what their current situation is and how they approach certain things. Then I guess the third one would be content knowledge. And while I
Mhm.
realize that, teacher prep programs cannot teach you all the content knowledge that you need, but to work in the classroom, but just making sure that teachers do have a fairly strong understanding of literacy instruction and what it means to teach children how to read, what it means to teach them how to become writers, what it means to teach them mathematical concepts. I think content knowledge is very critical, because once you have that content knowledge, it doesn't matter what educational resource is put in front of you and you're told to teach using that. If you have the content knowledge, you'll be okay, and you have a basic foundational understanding of literacy instruction, you'll be fine. But if you don't, you're gonna you're gonna have to take that teacher's edition home every night and study it. And then a fourth one, I actually had three down, but
Okay.
as I kept thinking about it, one of my strong concerns is uh, the fact that teachers need to have a clear understanding with what it means to teach in a rigorous
Mhm.
way. And very often in urban settings, we have teachers, and that's not just, people that just are starting out in the field,
Mhm.
but teachers need to have a clear understanding of what it means to teach at a high level.
Mhm.
If you're always teaching down here low, then that's where your students are going to be. But expect the most out of your students, and when you're teaching, teach like that. Don't sell your students short, and always just think the very basic. So rigorous instruction would be my fourth one.
Awesome. Just I want to, I don't know, just to add to that point, I think just obviously I'm not a classroom teacher, have not had the privilege of doing, having that specific position, but even being still working in the field of education and even some of the work that I do now, I think, being able to see that and realizing that students will rise to the expectations that you set for them. So even if we do understand some of the things that they're facing outside of the classroom, within their homes, that doesn't mean they don't want to learn. They just are looking for that connection and looking for someone. I think in a lot of ways kids want to be held accountable
Mm-hmm.
for their experience, but like you said, sometimes things are dumbed down, or like, oh well, we'll just give little Jimmy here whatever, he's just here just to pass the time. But like, no, they're looking for people to set those standards. And it was something you said earlier, and it just made me think about, I think when you're talking about classroom management and setting those expectations as well, just I think in general people value consistency, and so even if they know, I think in high school you joke around like, oh, such and such is so mean, but ultimately that that person is there to support you. They have to have that tough exterior sometimes, and you also know the teachers that unfortunately I don't want to use the term pushover, but students know who they can kind of get away with things with, but they also know who will be there to support them as well. So,
Well, and I would also add, because I thought about this as you were talking, that the ultimate goal that teachers must have always in the front of their mind is that their responsibility is to prepare students to be college and career ready. And I think very often elementary teachers don't think that way. But the Common Core standards that we currently live with were written with that in mind. That's one of the many reasons that we went from grade level expectations in
Mm-hmm.
individual states to
Mm-hmm.
college and to Common Core standards, because we wanted our educators and people that were thought leaders in this area wanted children to have a level, more of a level playing field. If I live in Wyoming and then all of a sudden my family decides to move to Kansas City, Missouri, the playing field was going to be different when we
Mm-hmm.
had grade level expectations. But if we have a common set of standards that children are expected to know and be able to do, we're going to be preparing them to be college and career ready and to
Mm-hmm.
have that competitive edge when they get to that point where they're, going to the next level. So, trying to help teachers, especially at the elementary level, they're not used to thinking about college and career readiness. But
Right.
our job at the elementary level is to create the foundation for that work.
Another thing that you were talking about, just kind of back to the whole cultural competency thing, and then you were talking about how you've had the relatability with Black students, well, because you're Black. And so, just when you consider, obviously, the countless interactions with Black students, what do you think about, what's unique to what Black students need in comparison to students of other races within school settings, within education?
Well, I would say one thing that Black students need is they need to know that the teacher cares,
Mm-hmm.
and they need to know that the teacher cares in a genuine way, because there are some teachers that will show that they care, but it's, let me give you this, let me give you that.
Yep.
If you do this, then I'll give you that. But the knowing that you care is when you hold me accountable,
Right.
and that you ensure that the rest of the students in this class are being held to the same standard. Because one thing kids do not like is when they can see that the teacher has a favorite, and and
Yeah.
that things are not fair and equitable. They'll call you out on it in a heartbeat. So I think that's one of the biggest things that uh, you know teachers need to understand, that black students need. And then I think another one is, and it goes back to uh, that rigorous instruction.
Hmm.
Kids know when you're teaching them rigorously and when you're not. And I'll
Hmm.
use the example of, there's been many times when I, as an instructional coach, in my quest to support a teacher,
Hmm.
have done model lessons, or gone into the classroom, had a conversation with a teacher about something that they were not doing, or something that they needed to improve upon.
Hmm.
And so one of the things that I might do is offer my support by modeling a lesson, and having very specific things that I want that teacher to pay close attention to, so that
Hmm.
after I model that lesson, then we have a conversation about what did they notice that I did, and then the beat goes on. So
Hmm.
one of the things that I've had experience with is kids saying, "Will you come back and teach our class?"
Yeah.
And what that tells me is I must have been doing something that their teacher was not doing. Of course, I already knew that,
Right.
but that that I was holding them accountable, and I was teaching them and expecting them to I was teaching them at a high level, and
Hmm.
they were being challenged. And kids know when they're not being challenged. And it's hard to help new teachers understand that, but they do. They know when a teacher is just messing around, and when a teacher is really doing what they're supposed to be doing. So I would say that those two
Mhm.
things, would definitely be, because I think if
Mhm.
you're doing all those things, then the other pieces are going to fall into place.
Yeah. Definitely. I think just I'm thinking about my last question of what is your call to action for educators who work with Black students? And I think you kind of answered that. So, well, throughout the course of the conversation, but holding
Well,
students accountable, showing that you care. But if there's anything else that's like, this is what I
well,
need y'all to do.
I think one of the big things, and it's been a word that has been very very easily thrown around, and that's the word trauma.
Mhm.
I think trauma is real. Oh, I know it's real,
Right.
and it is a it's a it keeps us from doing our jobs initially. But one of the things that I would say that teachers need is a good, strong professional learning around trauma, and how you work with students who are victims of trauma. uh, they can still learn, even though they may have, had some traumatic experience. Because
Mhm.
the facts of the matter is, we've all,
Right.
every person that walks the earth has had some sort of trauma occur. It's just to the degree that
Right.
it might be, or the severity that it is. But there are some children that have trauma that affects
Mhm.
them in the classroom, and it affects their being, and so it is hard to get through to them. But I think that a good, strong training and in the area of trauma is also something that teachers would benefit from, and it needs to be ongoing. It needs to be ongoing. It's not just a one time deal, and then you don't ever learn anything more about it. Because I really do think that, there's a lot of research out there
Mhm.
that says that we're learning more and more about trauma and how it affects, uh, particularly children of color.
Mhm.
So I would say that would be another one.
Another one. So, training around trauma, cultural competency, simply just knowing that teachers care. And I think, just when I think about kind of wrapping this all together, when I think about, your impact as an educator, when you turned, I guess that was your 55th birthday, and I was pulling together the project and having people send messages. I thought it was pretty cool that I could reach out to some former students that you had, when they were in third grade and now they're, late 20s. So we're talking, over 20 years or 15 to 20 years or so of kind of ongoing, and just, well, Miss Nance was this to me. And I know that it extends. I know these are Black students that I'm talking about, but I think, even beyond Black students, I know that you've had an impact, and not only do students know that you care, but I think I could say the same for the relationships that you've had with fellow educators. Even now that I work in the school district that you used to work in, you are still a staple. Your name is still a staple, and it's, oh, you're Monica's daughter. So in some ways, I try to just be my own self, and people don't really know until the conversation comes up, since my
Mm.
last name is Everett now. But you have definitely had a lasting legacy as a Black woman educator. And I don't know, maybe you've never like thought of yourself as a Black woman educator, but you've just always thought of yourself as a teacher, and outside looking in, like, you just teach all the time, from teaching school to teaching Sunday school to teaching the grandchildren. Like, you just are literally a teacher. So that is you through and through. So I thank you for giving me your time on a Saturday night, to talk about education, obviously something that you love. And thank you again.
Well, thank you for having me.
No problem. Always my go to education source.